4.2 gave us a lot of lore to look into, but for me, Surtalogi is the most interesting. From what I've found, he may have been connected to 4 kings, Remus, Ermin, Deshret, and Nibelung, as well as the Light Prince from the Pale Princess books. Of course, even with a month of research and fact-checking, this video is very speculative, so take my findings with a grain of salt. Let's start with the etymology of his name. The Black Flame. Surtalogi derives his name from Old Norse mythology, where Surtr was a Jotun or giant of the fire realm, and Logi was the embodiment of fire itself. This combination gives us Surtr's flame, but taken literally, Surtr means black in Old Norse, so we could interpret it as black flame, similar to what we observe from Colley's Archon residue and Diluc's delusion. We'll talk more about that a bit later. With Genshin drawing a lot of inspiration from Old Norse influences, let's look into one of my favorite books based on it for some clues. The Legend of the Shattered Halberd. The story revolves around Mimir, a man raised by Khan, and Asura from Jotunheim, and Fischl, the daughter of the Celestial Emperor. They're searching for 9 ominous or cursed swords to prevent the world from burning in hellfire. There are 9 realms in the story, each a world of its own. Zhongzhou, meaning Midland, aligns with the human realm Midgard, created from Ymir. Shenzhou is akin to Asgard, the realm of the Aesir gods, and Jotunheim is the realm of the Jotun, or giants. The Mist realm should be Niflheim, where the dragon Nidhogg is trapped, and the Fire realm aligns with Muspelheim, guarded by Surtr. The Unknown realms should be Alfheim, the realm of the Light Elves, Vanaheim, the realm of the Vanir gods, Svartalfar, the realm of the Dark Elves, and Nidavellir, the realm of the Dwarves. Towards the end of the story, Mimir makes a terrifying discovery. The sword he inherited from his father is revealed to be the dormant Larvatean, the cursed sword responsible for destroying the world in hellfire. To Fischl's horror, it had just absorbed the runes of the Fire realm, reigniting its all-devouring flames. Mimir, Surtr, and Loki, the inspirations behind Surtalogi. In the context of Norse mythology, the end of Ragnarok involved Surtr engulfing the world in flames, wielding an unnamed fiery sword that I suspect is also Larvatean. This is because Sinmara, Surtr's consort, safeguards it under 9 locks, emphasizing its destructive potential. But the character who owns the sword in the Shattered Halberd story is Mir, who is based on Mimir. Mimir was renowned for his wisdom and his role as an advisor to Odin, with Odin sacrificing his eye to drink from Mimir's well of knowledge. More notably, Mimir was the husband of Surtr's consort Sinmara. Considering that Mimir possesses the sword capable of unleashing the world-consuming flames like Surtr, I wonder whether Mimir, after wielding this sword, became known as Surtr's Flame, leading to the name Surtalogi. Whether this was just a power-up or a possession, we can't say for sure, but the swords do drain people's intellect, indicating a possession. If this interpretation holds, Mimir may have advised King Ermin and was involved in tearing open the Veil of Sin. This becomes even more intriguing when we look into another interpretation of Surtalogi's name. Drawing parallels from the Ring of the Nibelung, the Logi part of his name might reference Loki, referred to as Log or fire in the story. Much like Mimir in Norse mythology, Loki served as Odin's advisor, but harbored hatred towards the gods, wishing to burn Valhalla down. Moreover, Loki was credited with forging the weapon Larvatean using runes near the doors of death. So it appears that Surtalogi draws inspiration from a trio of influential figures. Mimir symbolizes his wisdom and knowledge, Loki his cunning and manipulative side, while Surtr represents his potential for destruction. In old Scandinavian myths, Loki and Surtr were sometimes regarded as the 2 supreme evils, which aligns with Surtalogi's title of the Foul. This connection also sheds light on why Child's Foul legacy is occasionally referred to as an extreme evil art, with its originator called a Demon King. The Red Moon and the Reaper. One day at a meeting of the gods, Loki's relentless insults towards them led to him being chained to a rock underground, with the serpent's venom dripping onto him from above. However, during Ragnarok, Loki resurfaces at the helm of the Naglfar, a legendary ship of the dead, leading the people of Hell into battle against the gods. This brings to mind one of the latest books introduced in the 4.2 update, The Fall of the Fated Castle, which seems to be loosely based on Edgar Allan Poe's The Mask of the Red Death. In the story, King Remus has a haunting dream of a decrepit black ship sailing through the fog. A tall, thin figure, shrouded in dark robes, stands on the deck, its face obscured, except for its cold, piercing eyes. This terrified Remus so much that whenever the clock chimed at midnight, he'd be overtaken by an uncontrollable panic. The dark-robed figure would surely collect on debts owed, and all before his eyes would be turned into dust, the souls of his guests, and his own included, as tribute to that dark, ancient world. If this was Surtalogi, it seems that Remus owed him something. Since he's similar to Rheindotter, he could have taught Remus how to place the souls of people within the stone golems. But it was like making a deal with the devil, costing Remus more than he anticipated. A side note, but I can't help but think of Arlecchino playing this role, working for Surtalogi and betraying Remus if she was a harmist, as she fits the description, and the Harlequin she's based on is based on the Heliquin, who works for the devil, chasing the souls of the damned to hell. But it's vague enough we can't really say for sure. Either way, Remus's fears came true. One evening, the castle was eerily silent until a rasping laughter came from an empty room. A storm erupted, and a red fog covered the castle like a shroud. On the central stage, the figure in dark robes appeared, causing the guests to fall to the floor before they even had a chance to scream. Remus sat on his throne, shivering as his soul was also snatched by the dark, and his castle sank into the depths of the sea. As the towers fell, a blood moon appeared in the sky, its baleful glow sweeping the land. This aligns with Loki's theme of being a trickster and riding a ship of the dead, as well as Surtalogi's title of the Foul, with the figure acting as some sort of grim reaper or devil. Notably, upon the spirit's arrival, the guests fell to the floor before they could even scream, a lot like the effect the sinner and the defiled statue have. With Dainsleif telling us that he might have seen us at the end of the Caribert quest, he could be referring to Surtalogi, as his name is associated with Khaenri'ah through their Norse inspirations, meaning Dane would know how dangerous he was. So if Surtalogi played a role in Khaenri'ah's fall, he may have made a pact with Ermin, as he did with Remus. The appearance of a blood moon could signify his arrival to collect what is owed, consistent with the line, "The eclipse is swallowed by the crimson moon," about the Eclipse dynasty of Khaenri'ah falling. This could also explain Ermin's mysterious indisposition at the end of his reign, stemming from the same paralyzing fear that afflicted Remus. It even links back to the Black Flames, as Cyno tells Collei that her Archon residue is at its strongest during the nighttime, just like when Remus became terrified as the clock chimed at midnight. Neohumans and Resurrection. Skirk says,
"It is only natural for those who are greater than humanity to possess a different sort of common sense, which is why there are so many problems in our attempts to communicate with humans."
So she and Surtalogi aren't human, but if the sinner was him, they also don't consider themselves gods. Since Abyss Heralds are neo-humans, I wonder if Surtalogi is too, or if he was born in another realm, making him a Jotun like Surtr. Since Child's Foul Legacy means Demon King armament is very similar to Abyss Herald's armor, and Surtalogi is associated with fire, I looked into the Pyro Lector's description and wasn't disappointed. They sing of the warmth of the dark flames, and use a dark fire furnace to shield themselves with abyssal fire. They also say things like,
All shall turn to dust.
just like Remus worried about, the dark-robed figure would surely collect on debts owed, and all before his eyes would be turned into dust. They have an ability called Ominous Star, reminiscent of the ominous swords, which were created from a meteorite, and talk about the world burning, rapture, redemption, revelation, and a second coming, heavily hinting at the Christian apocalypse, which we can tie back to Ragnarok. Even the Hydro Heralds talk about the world burning.
The world will burn.
It seems to be a common belief among them that somebody will return and the world will burn. It could be Surtalogi, since Surtr, Loki, and Mimir are all blamed for burning the world in the different stories we've gone over, but there are other candidates like Nibelung or the Light Prince that he could be working with. It'd fit Nibelung's similarity to Nidhogg, as he escapes his confinement like Loki and heralds the start of Ragnarok that ends with Surtr burning everything. We may even get to see their resurrection in Natlan, as Capitano taking the Pyronosis would mean the Fatui have them all, and can burn the old world as Piero wishes. It'd even fit perfectly with Natlan's tagline, Ode of Resurrection, and probably wake up Celestia just in time for our visit to Snezhnaya, if they're not dead. This is really only scratching the surface so far though, as some of the other new lore takes things up a level. The Alchemical Magnum Opus. In 1.1, Albedo explained that Citrinitas, the yellowing stage, marked the final step of the alchemical transmutation process. In reality, Citrinitas is only the third of 4 stages, with Rubedo, the reddening, representing the final stage. This was finally confirmed by the Ordo. Red is the foundational principle, the Philosopher's Stone, while yellow represents gold and mortal temptation. Yellow is simply bait. Red is the final goal. Since Rheindotter represents the third stage, perhaps Surtalogi represents the final red stage due to his association with fire and threat level to Teyvat, as his pet required the Traveler and a Dragon Sovereign to defeat it. If he does represent the red stage, it seems he uses this knowledge to make deals with rulers, only to later harvest their people's souls as payment. The lines from the deathly statuette may even be his words to King Ermin. See, my child, all that lies under the throne of heaven shall be destroyed by upheaval. The eternal peace of the pitch-dark void shall embrace us all. As it ties in with a quote from the new boss item, Tears of the Stars, seemingly narrated by him too. There will be no more sin, no more sadness, and no more tears, because everything died with the ancient stars. Which has extra hidden lore in the archives that Roosevelt pointed out to me. This extra line really feels like a choice he had. You will become an incandescent inferno, a new star burning brightly and illuminating the universe for but a brief period. Or you will become the ruler of darkness that stamps out all such trifling sparks. Forbidden knowledge. Considering Surtalogi's connection to Rheindotter and the understanding that red signifies the final stage in alchemy, it's plausible that this stage is forbidden knowledge, and people from Teyvat can't handle it due to being bound by Celestia's laws. If Surtalogi was the entity that appeared to Remus, he enveloped the castle in a red mist, reminiscent of forbidden knowledge. And Remus's discovery of how to extract souls and place them into stone golems also mirrors Deshret's use of forbidden knowledge to transfer the souls of the Jinn into machines. This fits with something Surtalogi would know, especially with his ties to Child, Ajax, and the Ordo referring to the previous Ajax, Pan, and the primordial human together, something Rheindotter is interested in with her primordial human project, and placing the souls of the void into bodies like Jorin and Elinas. In real-world mythology, Pan is a god of nature, known as the All-Begetter and the All-Devourer, which resonates pretty well with Surtalogi telling Skirk that life is precious, but also seeming to not really care about his narwhal destroying a whole nation. It also fits Nibelung pretty well, with him once fighting against the Abyss to potentially becoming the ruler of it after his defeat. Surtalogi making a deal with Deshret after the Goddess of Flowers introduced him to a way to attain forbidden knowledge is a sketchier link, as Surtalogi would have to be ancient and predate Conria, the nation he's most closely tied to. But it's not impossible if he came from another realm, or the first civilization, who seem to be the ones that founded Conria after the war with the second who came. This is due to the scribe mentioning a nation being built underground after Dragonspine was hit by a divine nail, which as far as we know, were dropped after that war. If this wasn't him, I'd say Nibelung is the other top candidate, as we know he predates Deshret's civilization and was corrupted by forbidden knowledge. Maybe with Surtalogi becoming an apprentice of his, or an equal, as Nidhogg and Surtr weren't particularly related, they were just associated with Ragnarok. We also witnessed the release of the red energy when we escaped the chasm, the same area as the crystal's past location. It's possible this crystal served as a portal, slowly weakening the barriers between realms while enticing people to worship the sinner, so that he could gain the power to break through. If those crystals were spread to different nations, Surtalogi or Nibelung wouldn't even have to leave their location and could basically use them as communication devices, amplifying the whisper a lot of Abyss-corrupted people hear. Deshret also had a crystal that sounds very similar. To weave together myriad thoughts and reign over countless souls, this is the essence of power. It was just as the Silent Lord saw in the crystal's secrets, and just as the Lost Companion had once taught. The essence of power line reminds me of what we've gone over with rulers making deals with Surtalogi, but then having their nation's souls taken as payment. This might even explain the immortal curse put on the people of Conria as a way to prevent him from claiming their souls to gain power. I think there was a blood moon during the fall of Deshret's kingdom too, as we get the achievement La Luna Rosa, meaning the red moon, from his chessboard, and its description is: across this vast chessboard, what horrors have been enacted under the light of the blood-red moon. Perhaps this was one of the 3 moons from the distant past, hinted at by the red moon of Your Lantern, reappearing when the realms converge and Surtalogi is able to breach the barriers into Teyvat. Descenders and the Saints of the Abyss. If Surtalogi is a king of demons associated with the Abyss, it'd make sense he wants to destroy Celestia. But let's look into why. My thoughts are that he's either a successor of a character like Surtr and took up his role, or he's Genshin's version of Surtr and one of 2 siblings that descended in a previous Samsara cycle. When we were discussing Surtalogi, Ashikai said that I might want to check the Pale Princess book, so I had a look and noticed Surtr fits the title of Light Prince, with him being a fire giant, and the Pale Princess fits Surtr's consort Sin Mara, as she's called the Pale Giantess as well as the Pale Nightmare. So perhaps the Light Prince was the 3rd descender that was sacrificed by Celestia to become the Gnosis, but already had a son with the princess. This fits with Mimir inheriting his sword Larvatean from his father in the Shattered Halberd books pretty nicely, and would make him Surtalogi, Surtr's flame. Alternatively, in some stories, Mimir was Surtr's older brother, as they represented the primordial realms of ice and fire. If Teyvat follows a recurring cycle, perhaps Surtalogi and Ymir were once descenders, and Surtalogi sided with Nibelung, making Surtalogi the second who came that led to the world being destroyed. It fits with the theory of him sharing forbidden knowledge with kings, since Nibelung is the king of dragons. In that case, Ymir could have been the 3rd descender, and was either slain by Celestia or gave up his own life to atone for the destruction his brother had caused. This feels strangely similar to our journey, with one twin siding with the Abyss and the other against it. Finally, Surtalogi may also be partly based on Aleister Crowley, an occultist that called himself the Beast, in reference to the devil, like Surtalogi calls himself the Foul. He founded the religion Thelema and a few others that I think the Abyss is loosely based on. The track The Vision and the Voice is the name of Crowley's book that may describe how people are transformed into abyssal beings. In the book, Babylon, the mother of abominations, and her consort Chaos, the All-Father, are rulers of the Abyss. But in order to reach them, the adept must give up their ego identity as an earthly individual before turning to dust. They are then reborn by Babylon as a saint to live in the city of pyramids under the Night of Pan. After becoming a saint, they gain a perfect understanding of the universe, but it's only the penultimate stage along the path of spiritual purification, with Ipsissimus being the highest stage possible. So perhaps Surtalogi was one of the first to undergo this process and is regarded as a saint of the Abyss, the most powerful abyssal being we know of, as the highest rank we've met is a Baptist. This would mean he's likely working with Nibelung, who I think now represents chaos after his death and corruption by forbidden knowledge, as Nouvelette calls him the Formidable Father, a title pretty similar to the All-Father. If I'm right, I think there are 5 Saints of the Abyss, as mentioned in the Serpent and Drakes of Dokoyokoku. Mysteries creation conceals, the sun and moon omens reveal, 3 corners in darkness shrouded, the void by 5 saints clouded. If Surtalogi is a demon king or saint of the Abyss and can change people's fates like Childs was, he could have done the same for our twin, which is why Irminsul lost track of them near the end of their journey and why they're working for the Abyss Order after hearing about what Celestia do to Descenders. Maybe they're fighting against Celestia to protect us from becoming the next sacrifice. So who do you think Surtalogi is? A giant from another realm? A regular human that became a neo-human in the ancient past? Or maybe a mixture of the two, with him being the son of the Light Prince? Is he as old or older than the first civilization, or do you think he's more contemporary with Rhindaughter? Let me know what you think, as I always appreciate you sharing your thoughts with me. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into Surtalogi, and thank you for all the support, especially if you've watched all the way to the end. Best of luck on your wishes, and I hope you have a wonderful day.